Hey everybody, I'm Wes.
And I'm Matt.
And today you're joining us for the Volunteer Scheduling MasterClass. Oh man, this is gonna be fun.
We're gonna have a blast. We're gonna cover a lot of ground. We're gonna lay some foundational work, but then we're gonna get into some real, next level stuff with managing and scheduling your volunteers.
And this was a challenge, Matt, because I wanted this to be accessible to someone who is, scheduling volunteers for the first time in the software, but at the same time, this is something I want people to take away to just use our scheduling feature to a level they never thought that they could, and also just save a lot of time, which is half the point of this feature.
Yeah. By the end of this, you're going to be a volunteer scheduling wizard. Yes. But before we get into the actual meat and potatoes of this, we have a few things we want to let you all know about that you can have and use when this is all said and done. We have a YouTube channel that we would love for you to subscribe to. I'll drop a link into the chat to that channel right now. Go ahead and click on that link so that you have it up on a tab when this is over and you can subscribe. We got videos about everything to do with the software like this. We've got other live streams we've done, some how-to videos, some other fun things we put together for you all, so definitely subscribe to that channel.
Now, if any of you are like me and you like to learn how to do things by just talking to other people using the software just like you, our Facebook group, if you haven't already joined that, that's a great place to be. So I encourage you, look for the ChurchTrac users Facebook group. You can just search it on Facebook, you'll find it. And then last but not least, Matt, when it comes to getting help ASAP, that help button is the best way.
Just click that orange help button in the top right-hand corner of your ChurchTrac account. You'll see some articles related to whatever screen you're looking at, but at the bottom there's always two buttons, Show All Help Topics and Ask Us a Question. Show All Help Topics takes you to our online user guide where you can look up articles that have to do with anything in the account. We've got, honestly, everything covered. Most of the articles that we have there have a video attached so that you can watch as well. And also you can even schedule a phone call with the support team from the user guide. And then Ask Us a Question back in that help menu again, that just takes you to our support ticket. So you can open a support ticket and reach the support team anytime. And that's totally free. And I mean, we have people monitoring tickets almost around the clock. We do sleep every now and then.
Yes.
But yes, you can always get the help you need when you're reaching out to ChurchTrac.
All right, well, we're going to get started, and if you're watching, obviously, in the future, hello future, you can't join us live now, but I'm just going to give a special shout out to Aaron, Linda, Bill, Robert. Y'all jump in the chat. Let us know that you're here. We're going to be asking a few questions as we go, because that's part of what makes these master classes so fun. We've kind of modeled them after our Getting Started live streams, which is a smaller crowd. We really don't want to go over 100 people in this particular live stream, and we're right at 94, which is perfect. That way we can have plenty of time at the end to answer any and all of your questions, making this interactive. So you can ask questions as we go. Matt's going to be manning the chat fully because I am incapable of multitasking. And so as we go, if you do have questions, just ask Matt in the chat there. And we will have a dedicated time of Q&A at the end as well. But we have a whole bunch of content to cover.
We got a lot, so let's dive in.
Yeah, and so today we're going to be talking about a few big things. First and foremost, we're going to talk about teams and roles and really just what that looks like. We're going to move into scheduling your volunteers and how to do that in ChurchTrac, but more specifically, we're going to talk about using side-by-side with scheduling.
That's the big thing.
Yeah, that's a big feature. And then talk about some pro tips, Matt, that I think people are going to take some of these pro tips and really get some good value out of that and use it as they go forward.
I always describe pro tips as they're not the necessary thing, but they're the thing that if you do them, it'll take your experience from 90% great to 100% great.
Yeah, 100%. Look at that.
Look at that. We're doing math here.
All right, so I'm going to log into my account here. Now, just to FYI, if you're new to ChurchTrac and everything, the worship and scheduling screen, this is available only on the Plus plan. And whenever you go to the worship and scheduling screen for the first time, you're not going to have any services or anything. And today, we're only talking about scheduling. And so I want to dive into teams and roles first because, Matt, that's the heart of scheduling, is first developing our teams at our church.
Yeah, you have to have sort of the structure in place before you can even begin planning and scheduling anything. So let's lay that groundwork. Let's dive into the teams and roles tab.
And so when it comes to creating your teams, you go to that teams and roles tab. And I've already got a few that I was just kind of playing around with in this test account. But I want us to take a pause. And this is more of a question I think I want to gear towards all of you out there. And it's, what is the context of your church? Because Matt, we've talked about this a lot in terms of churches and how they develop their teams and everything.
Yeah.
And when it comes to a church, like there's so many different ways you can go. And I think it always comes back to the context of a church. Is this a small mobile church that's setting up every Sunday, that has 50 people? Is this a mid-sized contemporary church? Depending on the size of your church and just the types of services you have, whether you're traditional or ultra-modern, that's going to dictate a lot of the types of teams you create and the roles within them.
Yes, absolutely. You even put in the outline. Before you start willy-nilly creating teams, it's best to look at the context of your church.
Yeah.
Truly, because and like a very specific and very common use case is a small church, usually like a small traditional church. And maybe you have a worship leader and a piano player, and that's kind of what the worship looks like at your church. And you maybe have a couple of ushers. And you have one person manning the audio booth, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
That's the majority of, if not all of, the volunteers at your church. So you don't need to create 4 or 5 different teams to represent everything that's happening at your church on the volunteer side of things. In that case, we would just recommend like one team essentially.
So just to show it off, I've got a volunteers team that I had just created. And again, just to reiterate, you just select the add button here to add a team, you name it and everything. And then once you add your team, it's just a matter of putting in your roles for that team. We'll talk about this other stuff in a second, but right here I can start my roles. And so just to use a model of a very small church, I'm going to say like usher is a big part. We have some ushers we want to schedule, maybe a couple. Another type of role we want is maybe someone who is like welcoming people perhaps, like a welcome person. Then we go in here and then we have our piano, and then maybe we have a vocalist. And you get the idea. Like maybe I add 1 or 2 more of these. And let us know in the chat, like how many people are you scheduling? Are you scheduling maybe 10 people every week? Are you scheduling 100 people every week? Let us know kind of where you stand as a church. But there we go. So that's just a real quick idea of just quickly creating my teams and roles. And then whenever you start adding all these different roles, you can start assigning your people to these roles. And just to reiterate, you just click a particular role. And then from here, I can start typing in names to add someone to a role. And so let's say Nick is one of our people, and Nick, he is going to be an usher. So then I can add him as an usher. And then I can continue this process, and maybe I can add, let's say, Bobby. I have a Bobby in our database here. So Bobby Harold, he's another person that volunteers as an usher. And there you go. So as you start adding people, you see that number count. I actually really love this, Matt. It's super subtle, but it's actually really helpful. Yeah. Is because as you get a bigger team and everything, it's nice to see like the depth of your team. Yeah,
so you can see, I only have 2 ushers. What if one of them gets sick? Maybe I need to add like a 3rd or 4th person so that we can just kind of rotate them in or have a pinch hitter, essentially.
Yeah. So many churches, I think, are going to fall in this boat. And for that circumstance, I always say, hey, just keep it easy. Maybe have just like 1 or 2 teams and a handful of roles in each. Now, as you get bigger, let's say you're a larger ministry and just your worship team alone, you may have multiple different roles. So like my church, as an example, we've got a few people that are capable of leading worship. So we have a few worship leaders, we have a few keyboard players, some vocalists, drums, bass guitarist, electric guitar. So you get the idea. I even have a saxophone player.
Wow. That's really something.
Yeah, George Michael and Ronald Swanson. So
Duke Silver.
Oh man. It really just comes down to, again, the context of your church is going to really dictate that in terms of how you build out your teams. Now, beyond that, let's look at a few things here that I want to point out. This is for every team, and I don't think we can stress this enough, because so many times people, Matt, want to think about this in just the context of like, okay, maybe like your worship service or like the band or something. I mean, we're talking children's ministry volunteers.
Yeah.
If your church has a safety team doing something like that, or just maybe your welcome team. Yeah. There's so many different types of teams and roles that you're going to be scheduling with.
And it's really important for us to emphasize this, because I do workshops, one-on-one on Zoom calls with churches every day.
Yeah.
And when I get to the worship and scheduling screen and answer their questions, I kind of see a light bulb moment for most of them where they suddenly realize, oh, this is for more than just the worship.
Yes.
I mean, the word worship, it's not their fault. The word worship kind of puts people into that thought in the feature itself, worship and scheduling. But it's for anything. It's for any volunteer role or team.
Yeah.
So use this to help you schedule all of your volunteers. Like Bob Dilly in the chat, when I asked how many people you're scheduling per week, he mentioned maybe 5 for worship and then more for general projects. Well, then what's the total number, Bob? Like, how many volunteers are you typically scheduling? You can use the worship and scheduling screen to manage all of those teams and roles for your worship service. And it goes beyond worship.
I mean, Denise has a really good point. We also schedule cleaning crews. This is perfect for that.
Love
where
that.
you have a specific day that your cleaning crews come in or whatever it may be. So yeah, utilize it for all of your different teams. And then going beyond that, when you're creating teams and roles in ChurchTrac, I think it's worth noting because it's so important. When you're creating a team and you're creating a role, that's actually creating a group and a subgroup.
On the people screen.
On the people screen. And so when I go to my people screen, this is the only time I'm going to really go away from the worship screen, but I wanted to show this. And I go to my groups here. I have discipleship groups and discipleship journey, all this stuff, but then there's the worship team, and then I've got all my subgroups under that. And so as you create groups in the worship and scheduling screen, those are ultimately going to show up here with the groups and subgroups. Okay, now let's talk about a few things to note as we create teams and roles, Matt, because there's a couple little things in here that I think are super important.
Yeah, these are key, crucial. They're kind of small but crucial things. Under teams and roles, Wes has the worship team highlighted, but this is for any team. You can select a team leader.
Yeah.
This is who will receive notifications as the schedule goes out and people reply to that schedule and either accept or decline the invitation to serve that day.
Yeah.
So this person will be able to monitor that in real time through their emails.
Another really important thing to note too, these little toggle switches here. So for our worship team, I want them to have the worship outline and songs, and I want them to have access to the song library anytime in our church app
Literally
or Church
anytime.
Connect.
Yep.
Yeah. And so for them, I would do that. But then someone like my children's ministry volunteers, I don't have these toggled because they don't need the worship outline and everything. They just need to know when they're serving.
Yeah, they just need to know when and where.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it.
Yeah, and then like song library, again, they don't need access to that. And so that's a little nuance there that I think is so important, just because you want to give your people access to the tools they need, but also not overwhelm them with a bunch of like stuff on worship outlines and songs
that they don't really need.
Yeah, especially like safety team, whatever it may be. And then the other thing too, another thing worth noting is you can give anyone in a team access to that song library. Like, I want to really emphasize this a lot because so many times I get worship leaders that are like, my people can't get the song library. Like, again, just to emphasize, you got to turn that on. That's key.
That means that anyone on that team can log into Church Connect and they'll have an option to view the entire church's entire song library, which is all the songs in the song library tab.
Yeah, and the key is they have to be on that team in which it's enabled for.
Yeah.
So if they're on the children's ministry volunteers team, that's not going to show up for them, but if they're on the worship team, it will. So it's kind of a little nuance, but I think it's so important, and it's a big feature that your people are going to love when it comes to your band and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right, now.
We've laid the groundwork. That's
Yes.
creating your teams and roles. That's the step one. And that's also kind of the 101 version of worship and scheduling. Now let's talk about actually like applying everything that we've done so far and actually scheduling some volunteers.
Yeah. And so to get started, Matt, obviously I have nothing going on here. Let's just create a service, or in this case, it's not even necessarily a service, this is an event.
Any event.
But this is obviously just service centric, but we're just going to call this, test one, just because it's going to help me keep track as we go in a second here.
Okay.
And I'm going to say that this is happening on February 2nd. And one cool thing, by the way, is in the setup in the worship and scheduling screen, you can actually have default start times and everything. So definitely recommend that. Now, we'll talk about templates in a minute because we don't have any templates yet, but we're going to start creating those. Don't you worry. So we add the service. Now we have our worship outline, our rehearsals and scheduling and roles. I don't want to talk about the worship outline today because
we'll be talking about that tomorrow.
Yes, and that's more centered around the actual planning of our worship and everything with songs and elements and all that good stuff. Today we're mainly focusing on the scheduling and roles aspect here, as well as just mentioning rehearsals. But I go to the scheduling and roles tab. This is where I start adding my people for service. Now, I'm going to go ahead and for our example today, Matt, I'm going to just schedule people on a welcome team, okay?
Okay.
And so I've got some people, I actually already wrote them down just to make my life a little easier here because I'm doing this from scratch. I'm doing this for the very first time. And so I can go ahead and start adding my people. So I've got Alyssa Adams. She's one of our people. She's going to be on our welcome team. I also have Nick Colson. And notice I already added these people ahead of time so that way they're automatically going to show up on here when I start searching on my teams for them. And so Nick Colson, we've got Jamie Ableton, so I'm going to go ahead and add her. She's a front door greeter. Then I have Kira as well, and so Kira is also one of our front door greeters. Moving on, ushers. So I've got Bobby. Bobby's one of our ushers, so I'll put Bobby in there. I have Kevin Smith. We'll put Kevin on there. And then we have another usher, Robbie. Bobby and Robbie, look at that. And then we have our coffee cart, and we have, it looks like Ben Wyatt is serving on our coffee cart today. So add these names. There you go. I've just added in all the people to schedule, Matt.
Perfect.
I mean, it's pretty quick, pretty easy.
Pretty quick and easy. However, there is a faster way to do this.
Yes.
There is a way to work smart and not hard. What you've just done was work pretty hard.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't actually that hard.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just adding the people. Now, before we show the smart thing, I just want to reiterate when it comes to sending out your invites and everything, whenever you have everybody in your service or event that you're ready to send out invites to, because that's half the point of this, is you go ahead, you click send/schedule invites, and here you can send out the invites for everybody on a particular team or all of your different teams, whoever it may be. Now in this case, it would just be welcome team, but if I was sending out invites maybe for worship and AV and welcome, I could do them all right here at once. And then we also have the reminder message, which is so great. I can actually have the system send everybody a reminder that has said they're going to serve and everything and has responded. And maybe 3 days before the event or maybe 2 days before the event, it just sends them a reminder letting them know, hey, you're scheduled to serve at this time on for this role. And you can even have it send them a reminder text message, which I highly recommend, especially if you're using our Twilio integration. And there you go. And then you can go to send out those invites, and you can have those invites send out now, or you can send them out later at a specific day and time. So that is like the quick version of just sending out the invites. But I want to take this deeper. I want to talk about templates.
Templates, because this is going to make your work a lot easier and a lot faster. Literally, like you could have most, if not all, of your worship outline even and your scheduling and roles planned out and scheduled with just a couple clicks of the mouse.
Yeah, and so to make this a template, let's say, all right, this is for our welcome team. We don't worry about our worship outline for our welcome team. We're only focused on the scheduling aspect of it and everything. I want to make this a template. All I have to do is select this edit button, and I'll just do it again because I went there quick. Edit, click edit, and then use as a template, yes.
That's it.
That's literally it. And now it is a template. So now in the future, when I want to create an event and I go to add an event, and we're going to call this test 1B, and because I'm going to delete this after I create it, and you'll see why. But I'm going to add it using a template, and there we go. I already have my template of test 1. And so I select that, and now here's the key is I can use songs, use roles, and in this situation, let's say I want to use the exact same people, I can do that, and then I add the service, and then right here, I've gone ahead, I've added it, so now when I select scheduling roles, there's all those people.
There's that roster, yeah. And just as like a little aside, the use placeholders option, whether it be for the worship outline or the scheduling and roles, that creates like these empty slots in those in the songs and in the volunteer roles, and then it prompts you to just fill those slots.
Yes.
So if you want to have the exact same people fill those exact same roles that service, you use the use roles option.
Yeah.
But if you want to slot in new people, you use that use placeholders option.
And I'm going to show that in a real case scenario here. So let's do some use cases. I'm going to give 3 big use cases that I think for most of you and joining along in the chat today, and also
probably
those of you watching at a later time, this is probably going to correlate with what you're doing. So let's talk about the use case in which you're using mostly the same people every week. And this is, let me know in the chat, are you in a boat where you're like, hey Wes, I don't have a swath of volunteers, we've got like our core group of people, and for the most part, every week we're using the same people. Let me know in the chat if that's you, if you're in this boat, where you're just kind of using mostly the same people every week. And so if you're in that boat, then you're probably only going to have one template, and it's going to be all those people. So that way, just to reiterate, when you add your service and you pick your day for which the service is, I'm just picking a random day because I'm going to delete both of these in a second, but I'm going to call this test 1C here, and then from here I'm going to use as a template, and then I have my test 1 template that I had already created, and I could use those roles, and then it's going to carbon copy all those people and everything. Now, when it comes to, in the situation Matt just said, using placeholders, that's when I would select that. So that is that situation. Now let's talk about another use case scenario that I think many people are going to really relate to. Let me know in the chat, are you in the boat where you say, hey Wes, we do like a rotation at our church?
Well, there's some that already did that. Cindy says different people every week. Trish, our people serve on a team about once a month. That's actually pretty typical. Mm-hmm. Marcy says maybe every other week, and there's a few other responses like that.
That is, so at my church, our children's ministry is a really good example of this. We have people like in the nursery that will do once a month.
Yeah.
And then like in the toddler class, and I think it goes all the way up to our children's ministry, and then we switch where we have people that actually commit to an entire semester because they want consistency with the kids. But for many churches, that is the case. And so what I recommend in those situations is I've already got this test 1 template that I had created with these people here. What I would recommend is actually creating a template for every single rotation.
Yes. So like if you're, let me see who.
And I'm going to delete this one and get Trish, it out of the way.
You said our people serve on a team about once a month. What you can do, and this will take a little bit of work on the front end, but you can create 4 services and have your rotations built into that scheduling and roles tab for each service, and then use each of those services as a template. So basically have 4 different templates, or maybe 5 if you need that 5th Sunday thing, unless you're a church that just lets the youth team take over.
Yeah.
But if you have a rotation, create multiple templates and build that rotation into each template. That way, again, whenever you're scheduling something for that 3rd Sunday of the month, you just click and select that 3rd Sunday rotation or that 3rd Sunday template, and it's all built in for you and ready to go. You don't have to do much work beyond that.
And so right now what I'm doing, Matt, is I'm actually adding in all of my people for our other rotation. And so we've got Katie added, now I'm going to add Bill, and then we've got, let's see, Alan. We'll add Alan into the mix. We've got William Wallace. Let me know in the chat if you know that reference. And then we have got Elizabeth running our coffee cart. So there we go. And I've added the name. So now we've got our next template, and we're ready to go. So if you're in a church where you're like, hey, we're in the situation where we're going every other week, then you've already got your 2 templates to pull from. Got my test 1 and test 2. But you know what? I don't like the names of test 1 and test 2. Here's the other cool thing. In the setup tab, at any time, you can go to your templates, and I've got some other templates here that I've created from previous events and everything, but I can take that test 1 and I can rename it. And so we're gonna call this our main template 1. There you go. And I can name it that. Now, I didn't create the other one as a template yet, Matt, so I got to do that real fast.
Go ahead.
So now I go to my test 2 that I created, and so I'll just edit that. And it's just so great. I can easily just go, use as a template, yes, boom. Then I'm done. It's a template, and then I can rename it. And so I'll go to setup real quick because I want to rename it. So back to my templates, test 2, and then I'll just rename this one. And this is going to be our main template 1. Close, there we go. So now I've got those 2 templates along with some others I've created a little earlier in the week. So there are my templates for that. Now, the other situation is in which you are just in a boat where you're like, hey, Wes, we actually have a lot of different people we're filtering through, and it actually is pretty different every week. So we try to keep some consistency, but we still have just wildly different people depending on the week it is and everything. Mm-hmm. My church, we're kind of in this boat with our worship team just because we have 2 different bands that are playing on any given Sunday. That's on top of lots of different schedules, and so very rarely do we have the same people going in a rotation. It's usually like different guitarists playing with each other, different drummer and all that. And so if that's you, then you may just want to do a template that's not necessarily focused on the people, but it's more so focused on the roles. And so like I can call this one main template 2 here, whatever you want to name it. And then I can go ahead, add this service. And from here, I can start adding in my people, or in this case, I'm not adding in people, I'm adding in roles. And so when I go to the screen here, it's not people, I select the roles and I start adding my different roles. And so for this particular situation, I'm just gonna say, you know what, I'm creating this template for like my worship team. And so I'm gonna create all my different roles here, and I leverage all these as my main roles on a typical weekly basis. Notice I didn't select acoustic guitar or saxophone just because a lot of times our worship leaders playing acoustic guitar.
I want to see someone that can do both at the same time.
That would be...
like harmonica and guitar at the same time? I want to see sax and guitar at the same time.
I've never seen it, but never say never. But then here I could continue this process. And how you plan, I mean, it really just comes down to how many different teams you want to be a part of the same service. I do find that most churches typically lump their AV team, their worship team, and even sometimes their welcome team with their ushers and greeters and stuff all into a service there, and then they do a separate one for their children's ministry volunteers. It's really up to you, and it just what works well for your church. But there you go. I've created this and everything, and I've got all my roles where I can start just adding in the people. What's so nice about this, Matt, is it already, because I selected a role, it's already pulling up the people that I can assign to that have already been assigned to that role.
Yeah.
So when I select like keys, these are my keyboard players right here. Now I can always like add someone very specific and then add them to that role in real time if I don't already have that. But most of the time, people are going to be doing this.
Easy.
So yeah. So that is like the 3, I think, big use cases, Matt, is either using mostly the same people every week, using a rotation of people, whether it's a rotation every other week or rotation once a month, having those 3 different templates for that is going to be what you want to do. And then in the case of like my church where it's wildly different every week, and we use basically the same exact roles every week.
Not the same people.
It's just not the same people. So we give you a lot of options for that.
I was in the chat, so I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to the screen, but did you see like that little orange triangle, that little warning whenever you accidentally double book somebody?
Not yet. No, I didn't, but I could probably show that here. So like if I started trying to add another person, and we'll say Alyssa, we'll just add name here, Alyssa.
Oh, you accidentally did 2 S's. There we go.
There we go. Alyssa.
You have 2 L's as well.
Sorry.
So there, Alyssa Adams. There we go.
Yeah. And then, so this name may have a schedule conflict. It's already letting me know and everything.
Yeah.
And,
so you'll see that little warning if you ever accidentally try to double book somebody. Of course, in some situations, in some churches like we've served at, where it's a small team, one person may be filling multiple roles anyway. So you can still add them. It's not like it blocks you, but it lets you know, hey, you've got somebody in the children's ministry and as a front door greeter. That's probably not going to work out.
Yeah, and I think this is so good to just kind of call back to like your church context. You said this earlier, and I thought it sounded so great. If you find yourself constantly being in those positions where you're trying to double book someone, it means that you probably don't need to have your teams that specified and your roles that specified.
I served at a church. It was a church plant, meeting in a theater, set up and tear down situation.
Yeah.
A small church with a small group of volunteers. And at first, my pastor was using ChurchTrac and he was trying to think through and build the teams out to prepare for growth.
Yeah, and scale it.
So scale it. So he had all the different teams and different roles under each team, but I would be serving in 3 or 4 different capacities. and I would be setting up all the signage out front with the flags and all that. And I'd also be setting up the welcome area. And I'd be running the booth, the AV booth for the service. And then tearing down all of that. And he had separate teams and roles for all of this. And at one point I had to suggest, no, it creates that weird conflict where it's not even necessary to have that warning that you're double booking me. Yeah. Just do that first situation that we illustrated of just having one team with all the individual roles. And even in a weird situation like our church where that one person is still doing multiple different roles, create one role that elucidates all three of those things.
Yeah.
Well, just have all right, Matt, you're just the guy that sets up and tears down the outside and the AV and does all that. Yeah. So that's just your role.
Well, and it comes back to when you're in a small church setting like that, you're communicating.
Of course,
you don't have to get hyper focused and listing all this stuff out because it's just a few of you that are doing so.
So if you see that warning that you're double booking people and you're seeing that warning a lot at your church, then that actually probably is a little pro tip or a hint that maybe you need to do a little bit of restructuring under the teams and roles and simplify things. The complexity can be built in later as your church grows.
Yeah. And we already talked about just how you can email that default invite or you can have an SMS go out and invites you can schedule at a later time and everything.
Yep.
So the reminder messages is probably, I got to reiterate that one just because it's so big. Like when you're sending out the scheduling requests, definitely leverage the reminder messages just because that really is going to help you avoid some of those situations, especially as because many of you in the chat, let me know how many weeks out do you plan? Do you plan out maybe a couple weeks out? Do you plan out a couple months out? Because this feature, I think, is probably one of the most important things in terms of just making your life easier. Even if you only have a team of 5 or 10 people you're scheduling, you don't want to constantly have to remember to go on your phone on a Saturday morning or Saturday night and text every person individually, reminding them that you scheduled them to serve. You want to just have the system do that for you. That way you can focus on being with your family and chilling out on a Saturday and not remembering to text everybody. So yeah, great thing. Now let's move on and let's talk about, because all of this really is the culmination of the big feature, which is side by side.
Yes.
And I want to spend 10 solid minutes just going through that.
Yeah, we mentioned at the beginning we'll have pro tips at the end, but side by side is so powerful that it's basically one giant pro tip that will make your time spent in the worship and scheduling screen so much easier, and just it'll basically, like I said, make you a scheduling wizard. This is the thing. So let's dive into it.
So to get to side by side, what you do is you select the service, and I've just got my main template 1 here. And so when I select the side by side, it's found on the worship outline tab. Select it. What that does is brings down a whole new drop down window. It's a whole new world, Matt.
A whole new world.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, we can't go there today. All right, so as I pull this down, I want to make a special note here that the first thing you see when you pull down side by side is all your service songs and elements. We're not talking about that today, but the same thing we're talking about in terms of people and how that all works is the exact same when it comes to your songs and elements. I want to scroll down and look at the scheduling and roles. And right now we have just our welcome team here, Matt. And so I've got my welcome team, all my people, but I want to go beyond just those. I want to actually look at more than just one service at a time, because that's the whole point of side by side. It brings up services side by side. So I can either load services. So if I have other additional services that I want to pull up, I can load those in, or I can just add a service straight from here. So I can click this add button on the top right corner of your screen. I'll zoom in just in case you're on a smaller device, you can't see that. But when I click that, and I can go ahead and name this service, and I'm just gonna call this main template 2 just for fun. But then going on here, add service using a template. This is why we talk about templates, because this saves you so much time. Because now I can go on here and I can say, all right, we have worship template A, worship template B, what template do I want to pull from? And so in this case, I can just say main template 1, whatever, and then I can use the roles, I can use placeholders, I can add this service. And there we go. Now I've added the service, and I've got all the same people going on here, which is funny because I accidentally added it in the same exact date. So of course it's telling me there's a conflict because I've already got them scheduled on this date. And so all I have to do is I can adjust that, remove it. Now I'm gonna just remove that one here, and I'm just gonna add another service here. We'll call this test main template 2 again. And in this case, what I want to do is I don't want to add it with the template, even though you already know you can add it with the template. I really want to show off the power of just moving things around with a blank template in here, because I think a lot of people are going to start doing this. I have a blank template, already blank, nothing here. What I can do is I can actually copy people between services or move them between services. I can even select a bunch of people or edit a specific person. Now in this case, let's say I want to move this entire group of people over here because I want to duplicate my efforts here. Well, I have all those people. All I got to do is move them over, and there we go. I just duplicated everything.
Wow.
Just like that.
So that's done.
Yeah.
Man, that was so easy.
Like it's literally done. Or I can just delete them all. Want to delete? Yes. If I want to move people around, I just toggle to that move between services here, Matt. And so then I can move them around.
So one person at a time.
Yeah. And so I can move those people here if I need to do that. Now, another thing too, so I'm just we'll go crazy. I'll go back to side by side, but I'm gonna add another one, and we're gonna start adding everything here just so everyone can see like an entire service here. So I'm gonna call this like worship 1. We'll say this is happening on March 2nd. So I'll add this, use a template. I've actually got worship template A that I've created. We'll use all my roles, boom, got all that. Location, I didn't mention this earlier, but you always wanna have some sort of location. I just kind of been skating through it because we're focused on the scheduling aspect here, but go ahead, I'll add that service. You can see my worship outline, all that good stuff, but I can go ahead, I can move to side by side again. So I'll go back to side by side, and you can see in this case, I've got all my songs and service elements. I've got all my people from my different teams and everything in here. And so what's cool is I'm gonna go ahead, again, we're gonna add another service here like I did. So add a service, and we're gonna call this worship 2. And just kind of play with the same theme of just like going week after week. And so this one will be happening on the 9th. And then I'm gonna use this with our worship template B, and then I'll use those roles again if I wanna do that. And then I'll add the service. Oh, I'll put a location though. You always wanna have a location. And then add this service. And there we go. I've got this one here. Now in this particular template here, I don't have all my people and everything, but I wanted everyone just to kind of quickly see here like the worship team where I've got a few different people here. And so this is really nice because you can move people around and everything. So maybe let's say I've got people that want to move around from one to another. I can easily do that. And so like I think I have Tyler on the drums, and then I have Derek on the drums and the other service, but they actually wanted to swap up. And so in this case, I'm gonna move between services. And so then I can move them here, move this person over here, move this person over here. Look at that. And so now I've got people that I've just swapped services, which this is super common. Like we have people all the time that like text us and say like, hey, I can't serve like this Sunday, but I can serve next Sunday. And I already talked to Jerry, and Jerry said he would swap with me, and there you go. Like it's just nice to be able to do all this in side by side. And then the beauty of side by side is you can add up to 4 services. And so I can click add again here, and I can call this worship 3 here, and we'll just pick our date. And so I'll say this is March 9th, I believe. No, March 16th here. And then add using a template. I could pick another template if I wanted to do that. And so there we go, worship template B. And then in this case, maybe I just want to use placeholders. I can do that. And then location, worship building, add the service. Now I've got 3 services wide. What's that? You want to add another one? Let's add another one. And so I can call this worship template 4 or worship 4. Or so we got that. Pick my date. And then I go ahead, I put in my date here, and this one's happening, I believe, on the 23rd. There you go. And then add using a template, and I can pull from worship template A, whatever I want to do. And I could use placeholders or no roles. It's really up to you. And then pick my location again. Boom, there you go. Add service. And now I've got 4, and I can easily just start adding things in here, moving people around, copying people over if I want to do that, and adding a bunch of people in one fell swoop. I mean, it really is just up to you and how you want to schedule.
So easy.
And I think most people, as they get used to side-by-side, they're going to use this probably 90% of the time for their scheduling.
Yeah, highly recommend it. Also, did you show how they can send invites from here?
Yes, yeah, that's actually a really good point, Matt. Like, I can send invites directly from side-by-side. So if I want to send all my invites for this particular service, well, I go to that service, click the button, and then I can pick my teams. And in this case, maybe I want to send it to everybody except the children's ministry volunteers and the regular volunteers, send out my reminder messages. Boom, there you go.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. So we just make it really simple.
Yeah, and side-by-side is one of those features in ChurchTrac where because you can do all of your scheduling from it and everything, it just cuts down your time because you're able to see, especially at least how I think, and I think a lot of leaders think like this, they oftentimes need to see multiple services side by side, whether it's picking people for specific songs that they're doing, if they're planning out their songs a couple weeks out, or if you are trying to work around schedules and you've got a few people who are unavailable to serve on different days and things like that. It just makes it really easy to see an entire month at a time doing that. Well, I say month, it's 4 weeks, and obviously there are months where there's 5 weeks, but yeah, being able to see 4 weeks at a time I think is so key for scheduling. And this goes beyond just even that. I could compare services from like a previous year. And so Easter's coming soon, at least at the time of this recording. Let's say your church, you have a certain way you do Easter, and Easter is like a big deal, and you want to kind of emulate a little bit of what you did last year.
Right.
I could have my Easter service from last year and then build out my service for this year side by side and make sure, okay, I use this person for this and everything, and I had this many people. And so it just kind of is helpful for things like Easter and Christmas and stuff.
Yeah, that way you don't have to like remember.
Yeah.
There's no guesswork. You just pull up all that exact information and bring it over. You may even have the same people wanting to do the same things as last year because that's what they're used to. They've already got that experience.
Yes. I think it's just, I love side-by-side and I use it all the time. And I think most leaders, this is where they're going to live. Yes, they're going to do a lot of other things, especially if they're getting nitty-gritty of like putting in details for like song outlines.
Yeah.
But when it comes to scheduling, side-by-side's kind of where it's at.
Yep.
So that's like the quick version of side-by-side. We can obviously go like really deep in it and everything, but I think everyone gets a good gist of that.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I know I've missed some questions. We'll get to those in the Q&A, so don't worry. Don't stress if I haven't overlooked them. I just haven't had the ability to dive into them. But let's dive into some pro tips to round this out before we get into the Q&A. Like I mentioned earlier, these pro tips aren't necessary, but they're the thing that'll take your experience just that final step and complete things.
Yeah.
So let's show off something on the phone that you mentioned earlier this morning.
Yes.
About setting availability. A few people even asked about that in the chat.
Yeah, this is so key, man. So encouraging your people to set their availability in Church Connect. And if you're a little late to the game, you're like, Wes, what's Church Connect? Church Connect is your church apps, your church website. It's included with ChurchTrac, and you can leverage that not only for building your church website and app, but scheduling is a big part of it as well. And so I'm already logged in as a church member. So what's really cool is at any time as a church member, I can go on here and I can go to upcoming events. And if I have anything I'm scheduled for, like right now I'm registered for Potluck that's coming up, but I also have the ability to update my availability. And so when I select that, you can see I've already got a couple dates I put in here. A ski trip, another event that I put unavailable, and then I can continue doing this and I can say I'm actually going to be unavailable on the 27th as well. And in this case, I'm going to just say out of town so your people can give a reason. Because sometimes they could give a reason that they can't serve, but that reason may be something that could be negotiable sometimes. Other times it's not. Like, I'm out of town. Like, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. I'm out of town. And so I can just hit close and, you know, there we go. And I've saved those dates. Well, this is so great.
One more, I'm actually going to add a pro tip on the fly.
Yeah.
How they can set their preference for communication. Some people
yeah.
in the chat asked about that or mentioned something about that. So your members can also determine exactly or set their preference for how they receive these the invites, whether by text or email or both. And that'll also apply to the reminder messages that go out, 1 to 3 days ahead of time that you scheduled. So they just go to the same place that they scheduled their availability, but then they tap that Your Info button at the top. And that's where they can enter that information and also determine how they want to be communicated with.
Yeah. And you can also toggle this on your side.
Yeah.
And I think most churches are going to go with email and SMS. I personally like it just because I like to cover both bases.
Yes.
Because occasionally people overlook emails.
Goodness, when I set my preference, I choose both.
Yeah.
Just so that I don't miss one.
Yeah, so that is a great one. That's probably one of our best pro tips. Going beyond that, Matt, use the email Teams feature when you've got last minute changes and things like that. So back to it, I'm just going to pick a random service here, and it really doesn't matter. It doesn't have anything in it, but I do have some scheduling roles. But when I scroll down here, we have this email Teams. This is a great feature because I can go on here and I can send out an email to one team or all the teams or specific teams and just tell them, hey, heads up, we've, made an update here. We've added this song, we've changed keys, we need everyone to come 10 minutes sooner because we are using our new check-in system and we want to take a moment to train you all on it. Whatever it may be, this is a great feature to utilize. And what's nice too is you can send those emails to people whether they've been added, invited, accepted. So it's just another additional nice little feature there.
Yeah, and I'm scrolling trying to find the person that asked this, so I apologize that I've forgotten who it was and what your name is. But there was someone who was asking like how they can, Tim. No, that's okay. I'm sorry. Never mind. Anyway, so one of you asked, like, how can you send curriculum to a team? Normally you would just attach that in like one of the worship outline elements.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking like, well, for the children's ministry, for a specific team, for a specific curriculum that isn't applied to everybody, you could use that email team option.
You can. Another feature too, and I think this is so important for those of you scheduling children's ministry and you want to send curriculum ahead of time and stuff, I would actually leverage the worship outline. Mm-hmm. You just make sure you enable the worship outline for your people so they can see it. And your worship outline is going to look something like this. This is like a children's ministry, welcome, arrival, serve, pick up. And then what you can do is I can add a file to a particular section.
That's what I meant earlier about you can add it to the elements of the worship outline. You can add links, you can attach PDFs and other file types to these different elements within the worship outline. So long as the team is given the ability to see the worship outline when they accept the invite, they'll get that info.
Yeah, and I see a lot of churches leverage this.
But your use case here illustrates like you're using this essentially as a separate outline. You basically created a separate event on this column and created an outline just for that other team. And
I would say for most churches, especially that are using this to schedule like their band, but also like their children's ministry is one of those areas where I lean towards always create a separate event for children's ministry, even though it's coinciding at the same time worship parallel. Having a separate event, because it's in a separate place too, technically, because it's like in your education building or whatever.
And the needs are just so different.
Very. And especially being able to have an outline, like a lot of churches may not need to provide resources and outlines for their children's ministry volunteers, whereas other churches, you may want your people to have access to all this good stuff. And so I encourage doing that for sure. So that's really a great thing. Another thing, as a worship leader, you can add rehearsal times as well for your worship services. And all you have to do is, so just like I'm on children's ministry, but I guess it really doesn't matter. But on the rehearsals tab, this is where you can add those rehearsals. And when you're creating templates, it's actually going to create a template for that rehearsal as well. So you don't have to keep creating rehearsals. But then you can say, like our Wednesday rehearsal. So WDNESDAY. I got to learn how to spell here. Wednesday rehearsal. And then I can go ahead and select the Wednesday rehearsal time, pick my start and end time and everything. And if you're maybe some churches, they have different locations. They're doing rehearsals for things, maybe choir, whatever it may be. You can have different locations as well and add notes and stuff like that. So it's great being able to do that as well.
You can also manually update a person's status if needed. So this is for the people that they're never going to reply to an email. they're not someone who texts back, but they'll come to you personally and say, hey, I can serve that day, and they'll just tell you verbally. Or even they're that person that's just super dependable, and they'll always be there, and they'll let you know if they're not going to be there.
Yeah,
so you can open up the scheduling and roles tab, select that person's name, and set their status as invited, accepted, or declined. So you can do that manually.
Yeah, I'll give you an example here. I had a guy a few years back, and he was the most solid AV dude I think I've ever had.
Yeah.
This guy, rain or shine, didn't matter. He was going to be there, and he was like he honored his word. If he told me, "Hey, I'm going to serve all next month," and no problem, he would be there. The funny thing is he never responded to the invites. When I sent out invites, he never would. And he would always tell me, I'm going to be there. I don't need all this stuff. I'm not going to respond, because he was this guy that had like this crazy job where he was just constantly inundated with emails and texts and stuff.
So it just was lost in the
shuffle. And so it would always be lost. And so he was just like, I know when I'm scheduled. I mark my calendar. I'm not going to ever respond. And so for him, I was just like, okay, accepted. And I moved on because...
You just knew if he wasn't going to be there, he would let you know.
Yeah. Or you have those situations where maybe you're on the phone with somebody and you're talking to one of your volunteers and they mention you, hey, by the way, you had me scheduled for that third week in August. I actually can't make it. And then you, right there in the moment, will say, well, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and mark you as declined then, and then we'll move on. And so it's kind of nice having that power. Just with great power comes great responsibility. So
yeah,
you definitely don't want to just start saying people accepted when they didn't accept it, and then all of a sudden you get into a scheduling nightmare because you have all these people that never actually said they could make it that did.
And speaking of people saying they can make it or not, I know we've already mentioned this, but it's worth mentioning again as its own pro tip. You can set the team leader under that Teams and Roles tab, and that person will get email notifications as the volunteers in that team accept or decline the invitation, so they can monitor that in real time.
Yeah.
There was someone asked earlier in the chat, does that person have to be a user in the account? And the answer is yes. So thank you for asking and catching that. That person does have to be a user in ChurchTrac. But you can add as many users as you need to in ChurchTrac. There's no limit or extra fee, and you can control their permissions and say, all right, you're just only going to access this one feature or something like that. So go ahead and add as many people as you need.
All right. Well, that is kind of, the general content. I think the big takeaway I was hoping everyone would get is that templates are your best friend, and when it comes to creating templates, it really just comes down to your use case. Mm-hmm. And then after you've got your templates created side by side, when it comes to scheduling your volunteers, that is going to be where you live a lot, because it's just so easy to move people around to different weeks and stuff like that. Realistically, once we have templates created, Matt, and we're leveraging side by side, scheduling a month at a time only takes a couple minutes in ChurchTrac.
Yeah, once the groundwork is laid, you do all that front work, then the path is really smooth from there.
All right, I have something I want to do.
What is it? What is it?
We're going off on a tangent. Follow me, David. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna have some fun.
Okay.
Because I really want some other cool ideas of just ways that we can make the worship feature just better. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to send me an email. It's weston@churchtrac.com, and they put my email up on the screen there. I'm gonna put something in it too. I'm gonna pick one of your emails at random, and we'll give you a free cup or something. It's very nice. Look at that cup.
Isn't that a Yeti?
Yeah, it is a Yeti. Yeah, so it'll keep it cold for at least a few hours. But here's what I want from you. I want you first to send me an email with just letting us know what you thought of today's live stream. Did you get a lot of value out of it? Was it the right amount of high level stuff, but also recapping? Were you like, hey Wes, this was way too easy and you didn't give me anything hard? Whatever it is, I just want to get some good feedback from you, whether it's good or bad, I guess. And then the other thing I'd like from you is if you have an idea of man, it would be super cool if the worship and scheduling screen did this. Let me know, because we have a long list of just different ideas we get from people. And when we get enough churches mentioning things, or we get one idea in particular where we're like, oh my goodness, that's a great idea.
There were multiple suggestions in the chat. Even one point where a bunch of churches, I forget what it was, but they all suggested a similar thing. And I had to say in the chat, send us a ticket with that in writing. We would love to consider that.
Yeah, but yeah, in your email, send me your feedback on today's live stream, and also send me any ideas you have of things I can't make promises and say we're going to add it all in, but if it's a really good one and we have other churches asking for it, or if it's just so good on its own, we're going to be like, let's add that. We're going to bring it to our developers and see what we can do, because we build this for you. We don't build this for us. It's just neat to see the progression of the software over these past few years, Matt, and just taking in so many great ideas from churches that are just doing some phenomenal stuff in their local churches and doing ministry in a way that, I mean, here we are in 2025, and like, if you would have told me that like people are going to be having conversations with AI bots, 3 years ago, I'd have been like, you're crazy. But here we are. And, and ministry is going to continue to change and evolve. And in the same way that ministry continues to change and evolve, just know we are going to be continuing to change and evolve here at ChurchTrac. But the one thing we're never going to deviate from is our ultimate mission to help equip you, the church, to build the body of Christ. That's what we're all about. And that's what you're about. And so anything we can do to help you with that, we're here for you. Any other questions before we head out, Matt? I think that was all of them.
That's all of them.
That's all.
So reach out to the support team if you have any questions later. Also, again, subscribe to our YouTube channel and join that Facebook group. I sound like a broken record, but I really, really recommend that. Thank you very much for joining. I hope you got something out of this and are really ready to hit the ground running in the worship and planning of your church services. Have a blessed day.